Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd find myself in a standoff with my neighbors over my own swimming pool, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name's Mike, and up until a few months ago, I was living a pretty quiet, drama-free life in my suburban home. That all changed when the Johnsons moved in next door and decided my backyard oasis was suddenly community property. I've lived in my house for about 15 years now. It's a nice place in a good neighborhood, not super fancy, but comfortable. The crown jewel is definitely the in-ground pool I had installed 10 years back. It was a big investment, but well worth it. I love being able to take a refreshing dip on hot summer days or host the occasional pool party for friends and family. The pool takes up a good chunk of my decently sized backyard. It's surrounded by a privacy fence, so it's not really visible from the street or neighboring yards. I always assumed that made it clear it was private property, but apparently some people need that spelled out for them. Anyway, things were great until the house next door went up for sale earlier this year. The previous owners had been an older couple, quiet, kept to themselves, never caused any issues. They decided to downsize and move closer to their grandkids. I was a little sad to see them go, but figured change is inevitable. The house sold pretty quickly, and before I knew it, moving trucks were pulling up and the Johnsons were settling in. At first, they seemed nice enough. Tom and Karen Johnson, along with their 2 kids, a boy and girl, probably around 10 and 8. They brought over some cookies to introduce themselves. We exchanged pleasantries, all that neighborly stuff. Everything was fine for the first couple weeks. Then came that fateful Saturday in early June when the temperature hit 95 degrees. I had just finished mowing the lawn and was looking forward to cooling off with a swim. I changed into my trunks, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge, and headed out to the backyard. As I was unlocking the gate to the pool area, I heard a voice call out, "Oh, perfect timing." We were just about to head over. I turned to see Karen Johnson and her 2 kids standing there in swimsuits, towels in hand. They were smiling expectantly, like they were waiting for me to welcome them in. Confused, I asked, head over for what exactly?" Karen laughed, like I'd just told a joke. "For a swim? Silly. It's so hot out. We've been dying to try out the neighborhood pool." I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. "I'm sorry, but this isn't a neighborhood pool. It's my private pool." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, well, when we bought the house, we were told there was a community pool. Isn't this it?" I shook my head. "No, there's no community pool in this neighborhood. This is my personal pool that I had installed. Sorry for the confusion." Karen's expression darkened. "That can't be right. We specifically asked about a pool and were assured there was one. Are you sure this isn't for all the residents to use?" "I'm absolutely certain," I replied firmly. "I paid for this pool myself and it's on my property. I'm not trying to be rude, but it's not open for public use." She huffed indignantly. "Well, that's ridiculous. What are we supposed to do then? It's far too hot to not have pool access. Surely you can make an exception." I was starting to get irritated at her entitlement. "Look, I'm sorry you were given incorrect information, but that's not my problem. This is my private property and I'm not comfortable having strangers use my pool. You're welcome to put in your own pool if you'd like." "We can't afford that," she snapped. "It's not fair for you to hog an entire pool for yourself when there are families with children who need it. Stop being so selfish." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "I understand you're disappointed, but that doesn't change the fact that this is my pool on my property. I'm not obligated to share it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to enjoy my afternoon swim in peace." With that, I unlocked the gate and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me. I could hear Karen muttering angrily as she herded her complaining kids back to their yard. I tried to put the encounter out of my mind as I dove into the cool water, but I had a sinking feeling this wasn't the end of it. Sure enough, the next day I was out by the pool reading when Tom Johnson approached the fence. He had a friendlier demeanor than his wife, but I could tell he was there on a mission. "Hey Mike, got a minute to chat?" he called out. I set my book down with a sigh. "Sure Tom, what's up?" He leaned on the fence, trying to appear casual. "So Karen mentioned you two had a bit of a misunderstanding yesterday about the pool situation. I was hoping we could clear that up." "There's not really anything to clear up," I said. "This is my private pool. End of story." Tom nodded slowly. "I hear you, but you've got to understand our position. When we bought this place, we were under the impression there was a shared pool. It was a big selling point for us. Now we find out that's not the case, and well, the kids are pretty devastated." I felt a twinge of sympathy, but stood my ground. "I get that, and it sucks you were given bad info, but that's really an issue to take up with your realtor. I'm not responsible for promises they made." Of course, Tom said quickly. We're not blaming you. I was just thinking, maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement, like set hours where neighbors could use the pool. We'd be happy to chip in for maintenance and chemicals. I shook my head. I'm sorry, but that's not going to work for me. I'm not interested in turning this into a public pool. There are liability issues to consider, not to mention the loss of privacy. I like being able to use my own pool whenever I want without worrying about scheduling or having strangers in my backyard. Tom's friendly facade started to crack. Come on, man, don't be like that. We're talking about innocent kids here who just want to cool off and have some fun. Are you really going to deny them that? You're free to take them to the public pool at the rec center, I pointed out, or get one of those inflatable pools for your yard. But my pool isn't an option. He scowled at me. You know, this kind of selfish attitude is exactly what's wrong with society these days. Whatever happened to neighbors helping neighbors? I'd had enough at this point. What's selfish is expecting free use of something I paid tens of thousands of dollars for. I've been nothing but polite. But let me be crystal clear, this discussion is over. Please respect my property and privacy going forward. I grabbed my book and headed inside, ignoring Tom's frustrated sighs. I hoped that would be the end of it, but unfortunately, the Johnsons were proving to be stubbornly persistent. Over the next week, I caught them peering over the fence multiple times, watching enviously as I swam. Karen tried sending her kids over to play with non-existent children she claimed lived here. Tom made pointed comments about how nice it must be to have such a huge, underutilized pool all to myself. I did my best to ignore their passive-aggressive tactics. I had no obligation to let them use my pool and I wasn't going to be guilted or manipulated into it. Still, the tension was starting to wear on me. I found myself hesitating to go out and swim, not wanting to deal with their glares and commentary. Things came to a head the following Saturday. It was another scorcher and I decided to have a few friends over for a little pool party. We were enjoying some grilled burgers and cold beers, music playing softly in the background, when I heard raised voices from the other side of the fence. I walked over to investigate and found Karen Johnson in a heated argument with one of my guests, Lisa, who had stepped out front to take a phone call. I don't care who you are, you can't just waltz in and use our neighborhood pool without permission, Karen was saying, her face red with anger. Lisa looked bewildered. What are you talking about? This is Mike's private pool. He invited us over. Karen sneered. Oh please, I'm tired of that lie. This is clearly meant to be a shared amenity. You people have no right to hog it all for yourselves. I quickly intervened before things could escalate further. Karen, I've already explained this to you multiple times. This is my pool on my property. I can invite whoever I want to use it. You need to back off and stop harassing my guests. She turned her fury on me. You selfish, entitled jerk. How dare you flaunt your pool parties in our faces while our poor children suffer in this heat. We're going to report you to the homeowner association for this. I couldn't help but laugh. Go right ahead. There's no homeowner association rule against having a private pool or pool parties. You're the one causing a disturbance here. Karen stormed off in a huff, but not before yelling, "This isn't over," over her shoulder. I apologized to Lisa and my other guests for the scene. We tried to salvage the mood of the party, but Karen's outburst had definitely put a damper on things. People started heading out earlier than planned and I was left feeling frustrated and on edge. Little did I know, things were about to get much, much worse. The next afternoon, I was just settling in for a peaceful solo swim when I heard a commotion from the front yard. I climbed out of the pool and wrapped a towel around my waist, heading around the side of the house to see what was going on. To my utter disbelief, there was a police car parked in my driveway. Karen Johnson was animatedly talking to two officers while pointing towards my backyard. When she spotted me, her eyes narrowed. "There he is," she exclaimed. "That's the man who's been operating an illegal public pool without proper permits or safety measures." I stood there dripping wet, mouth agape, as one of the officers approached me. "Sir, we've received a complaint about an unauthorized public pool on this property. Can you explain the situation?" It took me a moment to find my voice. "Officer, there's been a huge misunderstanding. This is my private, residential pool. It's not open to the public at all." Karen interjected loudly. "He's lying. This is supposed to be a neighborhood pool for all residents to use. He's denying access and throwing loud parties." The officer held up a hand to quiet her. "Ma'am, please let me handle this." He turned back to me. "Do you have documentation proving ownership and proper permitting for this pool?" I nodded, still somewhat in shock. "Of course. Everything's fully permitted and up to code. I can get the paperwork for you right now." "I'd appreciate that," the officer replied. I quickly went inside and retrieved the folder containing all the pool documentation, permits, inspection reports, proof of insurance, everything. I handed it over to the officer, who began looking through it carefully. After a few minutes, he nodded and handed the folder back. Everything appears to be in order here. This is clearly a properly permitted private pool. Karen's jaw dropped. But that can't be right. We were told there was a community pool. The second officer, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Ma'am, it seems you were given incorrect information. This pool is Mr. He glanced at me questioningly. Peterson, I supplied. Mr. Peterson's private property, the officer continued. He's under no obligation to allow public access. Karen sputtered incoherently for a moment before finding her voice. This is ridiculous. Are you just going to let him get away with this? The first officer sighed. Ma'am, no crime has been committed here. Mr. Peterson is well within his rights to restrict access to his private pool. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises and stop harassing your neighbor. But, Karen stammered. Now, ma'am, the officer said firmly, unless you'd like us to escort you off the property. Red-faced and seething, Karen stormed off towards her house. The officers turned back to me apologetically. Sorry for the disturbance, sir, the first one said. You're free to return to your swim. Have a nice day. As they walked back to their patrol car, I heard the second officer mutter, some people have way too much time on their hands. I couldn't have agreed more. I thought that would be the end of it. Surely even Karen would give up after involving the police and being so thoroughly shut down. But I had underestimated just how stubborn and entitled my new neighbor could be. Over the next few weeks, the Johnsons seemed to make it their mission to make my life miserable. They started calling in noise complaints every time I had people over, even if we were just quietly chatting by the pool. They let their dog bark incessantly, particularly when I was trying to relax outside. Karen would accidentally turn on her sprinklers when I was sunbathing, spraying water over the fence. It was childish and petty, but incredibly frustrating to deal with. I did my best to ignore their antics and document everything in case I needed to pursue legal action. I also installed security cameras around the pool area, just to be safe. The final straw came about a month after the police incident. I came home from work one evening to find my gate ajar and splashing sounds coming from the backyard. My blood ran cold as I rushed around to investigate. Sure enough, there were Karen and Tom's kids, happily splashing away in my pool while their parents lounged in my patio furniture. They all froze when they saw me, looking like deer in headlights. What the hell do you think you're doing? I shouted, absolutely livid. Karen recovered first, pasting on a fake smile. Oh, Mike, we thought you'd be working late again. We were just enjoying this lovely evening. I was practically shaking with anger. By breaking into my yard and trespassing in my pool? Are you insane? Tom stood up, holding his hands out placatingly. Now hold on. Let's not overreact here. The gate was unlocked. We figured you'd finally come around and decided to share. The gate was not unlocked, I snarled. You either pick the lock or hop the fence. I want all of you out of here right now before I call the cops. There's no need for that, Karen said nervously. We're leaving, see? She started ushering her reluctant kids out of the pool. As they gathered their things, I noticed several of my pool toys and floats were missing. Where's the rest of my pool equipment? I demanded. Karen and Tom exchanged guilty looks. Oh, well, we may have borrowed a few things, Tom admitted sheepishly. We'll bring them right back. I was seeing red at this point. Oh no. You're not going anywhere. I'm calling the police right now and reporting this break-in and theft. Karen's eyes widened in panic. No, please. We're sorry, okay? We just wanted the kids to have some fun. We'll replace anything that's missing. But I was beyond listening to their excuses. I pulled out my phone and dialed cop, keeping a watchful eye on the Johnsons to make sure they didn't bolt. When the police arrived, I showed them the security camera footage of the Johnsons climbing over my fence earlier that day. I also had them document the missing pool equipment. Karen and Tom were arrested for criminal trespassing and petty theft. As they were being led away in handcuffs, Karen turned to me with tears in her eyes. How could you do this to us? We're your neighbors. I just shook my head in disbelief. You brought this on yourselves. Maybe you'll finally learn to respect other people's property. The officers took my statement and advised me to file for a restraining order given the ongoing harassment. I readily agreed, beyond fed up with the Johnsons' entitled behavior. Word of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood. Most people were sympathetic to my side, having dealt with Karen's busybody tendencies themselves. A few criticized me for pressing charges, saying I should have tried to work things out neighborly, but I stood firm in my decision. The Johnsons had crossed a line and needed to face consequences. In the following days, I had my locks changed and beefed up security around the pool area. I also reached out to a lawyer to discuss my options for dealing with any future harassment. To my surprise, about a week after the arrest, I received a letter from Tom and Karen's lawyer. They were offering a formal apology and agreeing to pay for any damaged or missing pool equipment. In exchange, they asked if I would consider dropping the charges. Part of me was tempted to refuse out of spite, but after discussing it with my own lawyer, I decided to accept their offer, with some additional conditions. They would have to sign a legally binding agreement to cease all contact with me and stay off my property. Any violation would result in immediate legal action. The Johnsons readily agreed, likely eager to avoid a criminal record. True to their word, they replaced all the missing pool items and even threw in some expensive new floats as a peace offering. From that point on, it was like the Johnsons ceased to exist. They avoided me completely, even going so far as to erect a privacy fence on their side of the yard so they wouldn't have to see my pool. It wasn't exactly warm neighborly relations, but it was a vast improvement over the constant harassment. As the weeks passed, I was finally able to relax and enjoy my pool in peace again. The whole ordeal had been incredibly stressful, but I felt vindicated in standing my ground. It was a hard-learned lesson for the Johnsons about respecting boundaries and private property. Looking back, I still can't quite believe how quickly things escalated from a simple misunderstanding to criminal charges. It just goes to show how entitlement and stubbornness can cloud people's judgment. I hope the Johnsons learned from the experience and will think twice before trying to claim ownership of things that don't belong to them in the future. As for me, I've developed a new appreciation for the quiet enjoyment of my own backyard oasis. Every time I take a dip in my pool now, I feel an extra sense of satisfaction knowing I fought for and protected what was rightfully mine. It may have been a bumpy road, but in the end, justice and common sense prevailed. The whole saga has become something of a cautionary tale in our neighborhood. I've had several people tell me they used my story to shut down entitled requests from their own pushy neighbors. It's nice to know some good came out of the situation. These days, my biggest pool-related worry is remembering to reapply sunscreen. And you can bet I always double-check that the gate is locked, just in case any other neighbors get any bright ideas about community property. As summer winds down, I'm looking forward to hosting one last big pool party for my friends and family. It'll be nice to truly relax and enjoy the company without worrying about prying eyes or unwanted guests. Who knows, maybe I'll even invite some of the neighbors who supported me through the whole fiasco. After all, good fences may make good neighbors, but good neighbors make for even better pool parties. Update. It's been about a year since the whole pool fiasco with the Johnsons, and I figured I'd give an update on how things have played out since then. After the trespassing incident and our legal agreement, the Johnsons kept to themselves for a while. They avoided me like the plague, which was fine by me. I enjoyed a peaceful summer of swimming and hosting parties without any drama. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. Around March of this year, I started noticing some strange activity next door. There were contractors coming and going, and I could hear the sound of heavy machinery. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were doing some home renovations or landscaping. One Saturday morning, I was out doing some yard work when Tom Johnson approached the fence. It was the first time we'd spoken in months. "Morning, Mike," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Got a minute?" I'll admit, I was wary. "What's up, Tom?" He cleared his throat. "Well, I wanted to give you a heads up. We're putting in our own pool." I blinked in surprise. "Oh, okay. Yeah, we figured it was time," he continued. "Anyway, the reason I'm telling you is that the construction might get a bit noisy over the next few weeks. I wanted to apologize in advance for any disturbance." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate the warning. Good luck with the project." As Tom walked away, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was glad they'd finally accepted that my pool wasn't for their use and were taking matters into their own hands. On the other hand, I had a nagging suspicion that this might lead to more issues down the line. Unfortunately, my instincts were right. The pool construction was just the beginning. Over the next couple of months, the Johnsons seemed determined to turn their backyard into some sort of mini water park. They added a hot tub, a splash pad for the kids, and even a small water slide. It was way over the top for a residential property. The real problem started once their pool was finished. Suddenly, the Johnsons were hosting loud pool parties almost every weekend. Music blasting, kids screaming, adults laughing and shouting well into the night. It was like they were trying to prove a point. "See? We have an even better pool setup than you do." At first, I tried to be understanding. They were probably just excited about their new pool. But as the weeks went on and the noise levels kept increasing, my patience wore thin. The final straw came during Memorial Day weekend. The Johnsons threw a massive 3-day pool party that had the whole neighborhood on edge. The noise was unbelievable. They must have brought in professional speakers or something. I could feel the bass thumping in my chest even inside my house with all the windows closed. By the third day, I'd had enough. I called the police to file a noise complaint. When the officers showed up, Karen answered the door, clearly tipsy. "Oh, it's you again," she slurred when she spotted me talking to the officers. "Still can't stand to see people having fun, huh?" I ignored her and let the police handle the situation. They issued a warning and the party finally quieted down. But Karen's snide comment stuck with me. It was clear they were doing this on purpose to get back at me. The next day, I reached out to my lawyer to discuss options. He advised that since I had documentation of the ongoing noise issues, we could potentially file for a nuisance lawsuit. However, he suggested trying to resolve things amicably first to avoid further neighborly tension. Taking his advice, I drafted a polite but firm letter to the Johnsons. I outlined the issues with the excessive noise and reminded them of local ordinances regarding quiet hours and noise levels. I proposed that we come to a mutual agreement about reasonable party hours and volume levels. To my surprise, I got a response from Tom a few days later. He apologized for things getting out of hand and agreed to meet to discuss a compromise. We set up a meeting for that weekend. When Saturday rolled around, Tom and Karen came over to my place. The conversation started off tense, with Karen making snide remarks about my party pooper attitude. But Tom seemed genuinely interested in finding a solution. After about an hour of back and forth, we managed to hammer out an agreement. Pool parties would be limited to Fridays and Saturdays, ending by 10 p.m. Music volume would be kept at a reasonable level, with bass speakers pointed away from my property. For larger events, they'd give me advance notice so I could plan accordingly. In return, I agreed not to call in noise complaints as long as they stuck to these rules. We put it all in writing and signed it. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For a few weeks, things improved. The Johnsons mostly stuck to the agreement, and I was able to enjoy my own pool without constant disruption. But old habits die hard, I guess. As summer hit its peak, the Johnsons started pushing boundaries again. Parties lasting past midnight, music cranked up to 11, drunk guests wandering into my yard. Each time, I'd remind them of our agreement, and they'd dial it back for a while before slowly ramping up again. It was exhausting and frustrating. I found myself dreading weekends, which was the exact opposite of how I wanted to feel during pool season. After one particularly rowdy night where I had to call the police again, I decided enough was enough. It was time to take more serious action. I got in touch with my lawyer and we began the process of filing a nuisance lawsuit. We had plenty of evidence, police reports, noise complaints from other neighbors, recordings from my security cameras showing drunk guests trespassing, and of course, the signed agreement that they'd repeatedly violated. When the Johnsons were served with the lawsuit papers, all hell broke loose. Karen stormed over, screeching about how I was a miserable old man trying to ruin everyone's fun. Tom tried to play peacemaker, offering to renegotiate our agreement, but I stood firm. They'd had their chances. The case moved relatively quickly. My lawyer presented a solid argument, backed up by all our documentation and testimony from other neighbors who were fed up with the constant noise. The Johnsons' lawyer tried to paint me as the bad guy, claiming I was jealous of their superior pool setup and trying to sabotage their good time. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The Johnsons were ordered to pay a significant fine and adhere to strict noise regulations. Any further violations would result in even heavier penalties. To my satisfaction, the judge also mandated that they remove the water slide and splash pad, as they violated local zoning laws for residential properties. Turns out, in their rush to one-up me, they hadn't bothered to get proper permits for all their backyard additions. The Johnsons were livid, of course. Karen refused to even look at me as they left the courthouse. But honestly, I couldn't have cared less about their hurt feelings. I was just relieved to finally have some peace and quiet. In the months since the lawsuit, things have calmed down considerably. The Johnsons still use their pool, but the wild parties have stopped. They removed the offending structures as ordered, and their backyard is much more in line with the rest of the neighborhood now. Some might think I was harsh in taking legal action, but I don't regret it for a second. Everyone has a right to enjoy their own property, but not at the expense of their neighbor's peace and well-being. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it makes you unpopular. These days, I'm back to enjoying my pool without stress or drama. I've even started hosting regular weekend barbecues for friends and neighbors, the cool ones, anyway. It's nice to be able to relax in my own backyard again without worrying about what chaos might erupt next door. Looking back on this whole saga, from the initial entitlement over my pool to the noise nightmare and legal battle, I've learned a lot about standing my ground and protecting my rights as a homeowner. It wasn't always easy, and there were times I was tempted to just give in to keep the peace, but I'm glad I stuck to my guns. To anyone out there dealing with nightmare neighbors or entitled people trying to take advantage, my advice is this: document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to take action if necessary. You shouldn't have to be miserable in your own home just to avoid rocking the boat. As for me, I'm looking forward to many more peaceful summers by my pool. And you can bet I'll be savoring every quiet moment. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.